Hello, everyone. Welcome. Carter Christian are here for the Florida Squeeze, and I thought we were going to move on to talking about Tropical Depression 19, which will be named Sarah, probably by the time you see this video, and its potential impacts on Florida. I thought we were going to talk about that today and focus on that the next several days at the Florida Squeeze. And then also, I've got multiple history and book projects I'm undertaking at once. So I introduce some of those, and it is political history, so it'll be interesting to those of you who've recently subscribed to the channel because you're interested in Florida politics. But all of that's on the back burner now. We will deal with Sarah in the next few days. Obviously, we're going to have to deal with it. It's probably going to impact some place in the state of Florida, and that's not going to be great. We don't know very much yet about the sort of impacts, but it will impact the state, almost certainly. If you look at the atmospheric conditions and where the storm could go and et cetera, and when the storm would shear and potentially fall apart, it's going to impact Florida. But anyway, Donald Trump is making his administration Florida heavy. And I had already recorded a bit also that I was going to release and held because of Sarah on Susie Wiles and Mike Waltz and Marco Rubio. That's all not relevant right now. So Donald Trump has jumped the shark. He has shown us once again who he is and what he is by virtue of three appointments. Obviously, Secretary of Defense Hegseth from Fox News, who's made some crazy statements in the past, and then Tulsi Gabbard, Gabbard. I've never quite been sure how to pronounce her name. For national intelligence, right? The head of James Clapper's old position, Porter Goss, who was from Florida, had that position in the George W. Bush administration, NDI. I have to say, Tulsi Gabbard, particularly as someone who has opinions about certain foreign governments and certain foreign regimes, Tulsi Gabbard scares the heck out of me. Her relationship in the past with the Assad government in Syria, her relationship with the very autocratic and illiberal Modi government in India, who attempted to assassinate, per DOJ indictment, attempted to assassinate an American citizen on American soil last year, and did assassinate a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil, creating a diplomatic row there, a row between Canada and India that's not being solved. And then, of course, her seeming advocacy for Russia, right? I mean, I think that's plainly obvious. They mask it in, oh, well, we're not really for Putin or Russia, but really what it is that we don't like the CIA and the FBI and the military-industrial complex and the war hawks and the Democratic Party, right? They give all these excuses to justify their actual support for Russia. Someone else who does that is Matt Gaetz. And I've been around Florida politics now for 30 plus years, right? I've worked in it on and off for over 25 years, but was actually making trips up to the legislature even in the early 90s when I was a college student. Early 90s as a high school student, my mother would be up there a lot and for session, and then as a college student. There have been a lot of bad legislators in the history of this state in the last 35 years. A lot of people you would just laugh at. A lot of people that you felt like were embarrassing for the state. There has never been, in my opinion, someone who has risen as high as Matt Gaetz, who is as unserious a person as Matt Gaetz. He's not a serious person. So if Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump had turned around and appointed Ron DeSantis, who I think is an autocrat and I think is to the right of Donald Trump politically as Attorney General, I would have been like, oh gosh, that's really tough from an ideological perspective. But DeSantis is an Ivy League and Federalist Society trained lawyer. He's going to interpret the Constitution in a way I don't agree with, but he's perfectly qualified. That would be, if I'm a conservative, that's a guy I would look at, right? Is Ron DeSantis. And any number of other people here in the state of Florida, actually, not just Governor DeSantis. Matt Gaetz is a deeply unserious person. And I've been around, I have been kind of peripheral to his circle. So I do know more about him than I do about most elected officials. So in fairness, let's just take that with a grain of salt. Maybe if you want to take it with a grain of salt, say, well, you know more about him than you know about, I don't know, Tulsi Gabbard. I know more about him personally than I know about Mike Waltz, even though he's from Florida. But Gaetz was someone that other Republican legislators in Tallahassee were embarrassed by. He's someone that they were kind of cringed at being seen with, or cringed at being associated with. And then I think, I don't want to get too deep in the gutter here, but his reputation in terms of womanizing is well earned. We'll just put it that way. It is well earned, and you've even seen Republican legislators lash out at him during the first Trump term. Sitting Republican office holders say, "Well, you're one to talk about the sexual harassment or promiscuity, right?" But more importantly than that, than the sordid personal tales around Matt Gaetz, which I know everybody likes to tell. Everybody who's been around Tallahassee knows 3, 4, or 5 of these really sordid tales. It's not what this is about. But the lack of seriousness of this man. He was a class clown in the legislature, which is why, there were a lot of Republican legislators when he ran for Congress, when that seat opened, when Jeff Miller resigned, that thought, the 1st District thought, yeah, this is great. We're going to get this guy out of here. This guy's embarrassing us. We were scared he might go to the state Senate. His father had been Senate president. It's kind of funny because his father's a very conservative guy, and I think there were some real conflict of interest issues about some of the things his father did. But he was a serious person. His sister, very serious person. But Matt Gaetz himself is a bit of a joke. So he gets to Congress, and then he becomes even worse. He becomes even more unhinged. Wears a gas mask onto the floor when COVID breaks out, right? It's things like that. And he has been doing things like that for years. He did that here in the state legislature. He's done that in Congress. He's gone on television and said unbelievably ridiculous things. You even saw, I'm not a fan of Kevin McCarthy at all. You saw the way Gaetz handled that speaker vote. And then comes in during the Republican convention and disrupts an interview on camera live that McCarthy is doing, right, with a television network. I think it was the NBC or CNN or whoever. It's just really, these are the sorts of things. I could make this video for an hour and go through examples like that. I know examples of that here at the state legislature when he crashed press conferences. I know examples of this in terms of just his personal behavior and various issues, even things like beach renourishment in Okaloosa and Walton County. That was his state house district. The sort of unserious, deeply performative things he would do around those sorts of issues. It's just. But here's where the rubber meets the road. This is a guy who's unqualified. This is a guy who's not serious. This is a guy who does not belong in high public office anywhere. This is a guy who's very pro-Russia, too, by the way, if you want to get into foreign policy stuff again. We talked about Russia and Ukraine earlier. So there can be only one reason he is becoming Attorney General. Because if Trump wanted to push this conservative, federalist society vision of America, which Bill Barr did, which Jeff Sessions did, Bill Barr did, right? He would appoint someone like Ron DeSantis. That was just the name I threw out there. Greg Steube is another guy from Florida, Trump supporter. That he, by the way, hates DeSantis, Congressman Steube from the Sarasota area. He's another good lawyer. He actually was a very good lawyer back in the day. He could be appointed. There are any number of people around the country, right? But Gaetz is being appointed because this is going to become a politicized office, the Attorney General, heavily politicized office. I have pushed back on people saying to me, oh, democracy is over, saying to me, what are we going to do? Do we move to Canada? Do we move to the UK? Do we move to France? And saying, oh, this is going to be such a weaponized government. Now, I pushed back upon that. And people have told me, oh, Liz Cheney's going to be hauled away. Actually, if someone wanted to haul Liz Cheney away, it would be Gaetz, because he showed up in Wyoming days after the impeachment vote in 2021, when Cheney voted to impeach Trump and was agitating, right? And again, performative. But Liz Cheney's going to get hauled away. Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, they're going to get hauled away. And Adam Kinzinger, right? I've heard all the names, right? These people are going to be in jail. I've always pushed back on that, and I thought that was laughable, really laughable and hyperbole. But the appointment of Tulsi Gabbard to the position that oversees national intelligence and the CIA, a vicious critic of the CIA, by the way, which she has been, and then Matt Gaetz to the Department of Justice, which oversees all this stuff, including antitrust cases, right? I mean, that's horrifying. What is he going to do on antitrust? Although I do have to tell you, policy-wise, Gaetz is kind of unpredictable, right? He's probably the only, I think he was the only Republican in the entire U.S. House that voted against the drill baby drill, right? It was a straight partisan vote with one exception. Gaetz crossed over. Gaetz has had a long-standing history of supporting LGBTQ rights. He's generally pretty liberal on civil rights issues. He's been pro-pot, which I think also bothered a lot of Republicans, bothered DeSantis. But his appointment can only be one thing. There are either politicized prosecutions coming, or there's going to be the fear, the threat of those prosecutions coming. So this could be the apocalypse, because I had firmly rejected that from people. But now I saw these two appointments. In fact, even this morning, I was saying to people, it's not that bad. Like, Hegseth, that's terrible, but he's not going to last very long as Secretary of Defense. I dislike Marco Rubio. I think Marco Rubio also is like an anti-intellectual, not very serious person, but, it could be much worse. Secretary of State. He's voted against Ukraine aid recently, but I think he understands some of the threats out there. I don't like him, obviously, but it's okay, right? I thought, okay. And we're seeing some establishment names out there, some people who may understand the roles and responsibilities of government, but now suddenly things are racing away. The Hegseth one was a problem, but then you see Gabbard and Gaetz. They're arguably the two least qualified people for the positions they're being appointed to in the country, because they've been incendiary, they have been performative, they have been dishonest intellectually and in terms of actual facts when it comes to talking about the departments and the jurisdictions they're about to head. So we are headed toward an apocalypse if these two nominees are confirmed, and we see more nominees like them. I'm focused on Gaetz because it's a Florida thing. And as I said, I've been on kind of the periphery of his circle. I know a lot of things about him. But the Gabbard appointment, Gabbard, whatever her name is, truthfully, I never paid much attention to her, even when she was a rising star of the Democratic Party, because I had, this is where the foreign policy thing comes in, and I don't like, I think people should vote on domestic issues. I think people should be focused on domestic issues. I don't like people who say, hey, I'm voting for the Democrats or the Republicans because I'm Arab and I'm concerned about Palestinians, right? I don't like that. Or I'm Indian and I'm concerned about India versus Pakistan, or I'm whatever. But Gabbard, she was very early a supporter of Hindu fundamentalism and nationalism in India, even before Modi's election in 2014. So I said, okay, she can be aligned with me on domestic things like healthcare and wages for the working class. But I could never vote for her. She she may pretend to be a Bernie Sanders person, but she can't possibly be a Bernie Sanders person in reality. And this turns out I was right about that. So I don't like her. I'm alarmed by her appointment. I'm very alarmed by Matt Gaetz. So we'll keep going on this subject of Gaetz in the coming weeks and months, I'm sure. Hopefully we can get to doing some other things on this channel soon. I was transitioning away from the election, and then this happened. So stay safe, everybody. Maybe a video on what will be Hurricane Sarah sooner or later in a day or two.